Hello, welcome to the Chance to Be Champions podcast, a podcast brought to you by Pinnacle Esports. We're here to discuss with you the very best esports action from across the globe. Now, for the next few weeks, we'll be focusing on the Pinnacle Cup, the global CSGO event, which has seen 32 teams with some of the biggest names in esports compete for their share of over $100,000 to be kind of anointed the title of Pinnacle Cup champion. Of course, to get into it, I'm Kremer32, usually a caster, now a host. I've been joined by a man who's gone from books to bookies and then back to books with Adam Boothe. And of course, the man who entered a shouting match with the microphone, and rumor has it he won. Launders. How are you both feeling about this one? And how are you feeling about teams in Pinnacle at the moment?
Well, hey man, I'm glad to be on. Good to meet you guys. And I think this just to set the stage for the Pinnacle Cup. I think this is a really great time to have an event like this because coming off of Katowice, there's never been a stronger spotlight on tier two, especially in Europe. And the big question is, with Gambit waiting at the end of the bracket, is how consistent are these teams going to be? And also, what does it look like when we see some of these teams go back to their roots and play against some of the teams that prepared them to take on tier one teams? So that's kind of the big thing about the Pinnacle Cup for me that I think is the most interesting.
Yeah, feeding off that, the timing it is sublime for an event like this, but I also love the fact that we've got teams that have just hit their kind of peak for the last couple of years, that are engaged and sitting waiting for the next group of up and comers to challenge in that final stage three there. But also the format. I one of the key things that as bettors we look for is motivation and purpose in every match, and having 25 round robin meetings where half the teams are eliminated 3/4 of the season isn't always the most enticing. But with the Pinnacle Cup, something they brought to it is every match is either moving you through progressing or facing elimination. So that was right off the bat something I was very excited about.
I'm a huge fan of Swiss myself. I think that over the years, best of ones have been vilified and made to look like as inconsistent or unreliable results. But over the years, at the same time, Valve has put forward changes to slowly make best of ones more and more reliable. And of course, a best of three is just a few best of ones in a row. All of these map results we do rely on as individual results all the time. Some of these scores are close, but I think it's never been, with the economy being so tight, like pistol rounds mattering less, maps being incredibly balanced. There's a lot of merit to these best of ones. And I think Swiss formats that fell out of favor because they were based on best of ones should now make a comeback. I think it's time for Swiss to make another comeback into bigger events. And I think for that, it's so fun to watch. I mean, it's so much variety every single day. You get to watch 4 or 5 different best of ones instead of, maybe 2 best of 3 series or something like that between maybe with 2 matchups you aren't a really big fan of.
Yeah. I was curious if I would be the sole person today sort of in favor of the Swiss, because I know so many community members were against it going back. And I think part of that, as you said, was best of one relations, and then also it being with the invested in the majors specifically. And you just didn't want to see the teams luck out, I guess, with the draw of who they ended up facing. But I feel like no matter what format you go with, there's always going to be a bit of that randomness, and teams are going to match up against other teams just a little bit more favorably, and you're going to say they might not have deserved to be there if they played the other top 3 teams that are all in the next stage. But cool. It's nice to hear someone else in favor of that, and I've been enjoying it this week as well.
Yeah, you and me, Adam, are 2 people who think that Swiss doesn't have as many holes in it as people think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and especially like even in that argument at the majors, when you looked at the quality of teams at every stage. I mean, if you had a Swiss at Katowice, there's no easy path, no matter who you end up facing there. So. Yeah, no, I would like to see it sprinkled in a little bit more. So I'm glad that whoever designed this format sort of just said stage 2 is the perfect place to put it.
Something I've always thought was quite interesting as well is when you do go into brackets, especially even ones with lower brackets, is a lot of the time you see what should be the finals played at the semi-finals. Say by some team gets a really fluke, I don't say fluke, but fluke win in a group stage. That's messes with their seeding, and that then has a butterfly effect going into what will be upper, lower brackets.
You're,
and then
you're not a Cloud9 denier, are you, Krem?
I would never be a Cloud9 denier.
Okay, all right. Just want to make sure.
It's all right, man. It's okay.
we call quads $2, right?
No, right now, I think the kind of main team that springs to mind, at least kind of reaping the rewards of this, was just Havu. They're on like a 16-17 series win streak right now, and that's kind of off the merits of because of a Swiss stage, you put a lot of attention into your veto, and Havu, they've just ironclad their veto, and they've just been incredible. It really has been a marvel to watch, and I believe right now there's only 2 teams that have progressed out of the Swiss, that being Endpoint and Havu. And I think Havu, they really weren't contested at all. Endpoint, they fought a bit harder, but both teams did really damn well.
Yeah, I think something they have in common is that you have at least 2 incredibly strong star players operating like at the same level simultaneously. I mean, there's a huge spotlight on X7 at the moment, but Ariel also looks like he's, smurfing in tier 2. And these are 2 players who they could have fallen off the wagon a little bit and then lost motivation and then ended up on a lower tier team in Finland or in the world. And then just, progressively got worse or more and more demotivated. But from what everything Ariel said, he said that the playing environment on Havu is much better now. As we heard some rumors, of course, about what was going on with ENCE. And I guess the same can be said for X7. Because they not only look good for the level, they look good even compared to how they looked on ENCE, which is very impressive. You see why they were picked up on ENCE, and it's crazy to see how incredibly consistent they are right now. Because it's also not a small feat to be consistent at the tier 2 at the moment. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of tier 1 teams, top 10 teams, that if they got thrown back into the qualifiers or had to go through a lot of events like this, where they needed to play these events to make their regular amount of money and don't get invites to big major circuits, they would consistently lose. I think they would have to learn again. They would probably lose a lot.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I've always liked the multiple rounds of major qualification. Seeing I know a lot of Swedish fans won't like what I'm saying, but seeing an NIP, a couple of years back having to fight for their lives against teams you've never heard of, and being on the brink for entire matches and going to double overtime to see if they can just make it to the qualifying stage or the contender stage or whatever it's called now. I love seeing that ruthlessness from a much wider breadth of competition. And the Pinnacle Cup, they had a huge 32 teams in contention for this. Going to Havu though specifically, they're playing with a chip on their shoulder right now. That it absolutely looks like I was watching X7, spamming the dead bodies in like the last 5 matches relentlessly. Love seeing it. Right now, I don't know if you guys know this, but they're playing ENCE as we speak. I'm gonna have to go back and watch the VOD obviously, because if I watch it now, I won't be paying attention to anything the other you guys are saying. But no, that team has absolutely stood out for me. The perfect series streak they're on, winning 80% of their maps. Their worst, and it's a 6-map pool too. Their only ban is Vertigo. So I've been supremely impressed with them, but I completely agree with what Mohan's saying, that if a lot of the teams that we sort of see continuously invited to every big money event, 90% of them, if they had to get back in the grind and go through qualifiers, I think we'd see a lot more turnover within the scene. Absolutely.
Now, so the highlight as well, actually, is right now, Havu, they are considerably higher rated than ENCE, at least in HLTV ranking. ENCE, they've been a bit quiet recently. They've had a few kind of lackluster results, and they're now 39th in the world. Havu, they've skyrocketed. Like, their graph right now looks like the start of a mountain from they've just shot straight up. And, I think they're 27th now. I'm fully expecting that to go up even higher, come the new update or come the new updated rankings. And reality is, I think Havu are starting to only start to hit their form rather than kind of be in their kind of glory zone.
Yeah, I think just a primary difference between some of these teams, some of the CIS teams and some of the teams here are that the quality of opponents. I think Havu appears to be at the top of the stack at the moment, but wins over Copenhagen Flames, a win over Windstrike, win over Endpoint. These are probably the three strongest wins that they've had. Even though I think Sprout maybe or something like that is the highest rated opponent they played against. I think quality of teams like Copenhagen Flames on that super upward trend, Windstrike with Elian and Endpoint as well. I think those are the huge wins, but these are the strongest wins. What we don't know is how many tier 1 opponents they play in scrims. That actually plays a huge factor. Like with Gambit, leading up to Kato, they played everybody in that playoff bracket a number of times in practice before they played an actual match versus them. So some of the teams themselves were already, afraid of Gambit before the match started. And some of the players had some confidence going into the match that we weren't aware of. And I think that for Havu, there is still the question mark of when we up the quality of opponents, like, are they still going to be able to bang out like a win streak at this level in the same way that like Gambit could?
To that point, it was interesting watching the what's called Snow Sweet Snow right now, Home Sweet Home, I think it was last year. Gambit and Big were like the two. Big, we knew their pedigree prior, but Gambit was the other team that week after week it was like another 2-0, another 2-0. What's the point of these teams even entering, because they're just getting if they come up against Gambit, they have no hope, kind of thing. But it wasn't until I think end of August when they went from Gambit youngsters to Gambit, where we got to see them on a tier 1 stage. And I think they played Astralis the first time, and I think they got 2-0 the first time. But we saw improvement over that fall period leading up to what we saw coming into Katowice. So you're absolutely right. The question mark around Havu, this beautiful 15-match win streak, looks dominant, looks clean, but we still have a lot to see, and until they get to face the Gambit. I mean, it's funny that we're now using Gambit as the sort of standard of where Havu would rank, but I look forward to seeing that one, hopefully.
Yeah, they had, so I think it was the DreamHack Masters, so I got to cast the Gambit, the Gambit tier 1 event, like finally facing off. They beat Cloud9 2-0, they beat Complexity 2-0, and then Config tweeted out, he just tweeted out shredded, I think, after they lost to Gambit. They got absolutely mauled. They were
that's right.
They got destroyed.
They got like 7 rounds or 8 rounds over 2 maps or something.
And then everyone thought that they were going to be able to beat Astralis, and that was fair. I mean, they looked super strong. And then that's when we learned that they actually played against Astralis. I think I asked Nafany in the interview, and he's like, "Yeah, we played against Astralis. We thought we could beat them, but when the match went live, they got a bit nervous." So I think the only thing was the game plans are looking really, really good at this level. And the main difference, there's going to be some growing pains when they consistently play against the top teams. But what's also funny for Gambit is that when they go back down to tier 2, and that now they've like earned some kind of reputation, but they also become like a even more highly studied team. And then they have to go back to tier 2 and have this system that everyone's trying to copy because that they know that works now versus tier 1. Then they become like the Astralis of tier 2, and everybody's coming for their head. And then they ended up being one of the teams that lost, right? I think they lost to Copenhagen Flames at the in the Snow Sweet Snow event recently, right?
And sometimes like we were talking about, there's that post. You've hit your career high, with a Katowice win, other than Hobbit, I guess is what I'm saying. And then your next match is online. I mean, they're all online, but your next match is, you don't have that high, that anticipation. It's a little bit of a championship hangover, I guess, if you will. But I do think I don't expect it to linger, I guess is what I'm saying in this case. Is they did get that loss to Copenhagen Flames, who is another team that every bit is motivated and every bit is I guess one to watch.
The Astralis of Denmark, basically, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Something that I think is quite interesting, and I think it's be a bit of a topic for debate. What sort of teams do you have to start beating in order for you to be proven at tier 1? What is the lowest team in tier 1 for a tier 2 team to beat to be considered a team 1, and in order for them to be respected as a tier 1 team? Is it they have to go right the way to the top and play the likes of Heroic, Na'Vi, Astralis, or Gambit in this case as well, or is it somewhere a bit closer, a bit lower down, like for instance NIP team 1, that sort of stuff?
So the thing is that the tier 1, so there's just like a protected tribe there at the very top, like Na'Vi and Astralis, like almost like Na'Vi once in a while they have to go up against they have to go up against CIS teams and like their events or whatever. Astralis never play against anybody like not of like absolute pristine quality or whatever. And then like Virtus Pro and Gambit might not be fair because they play against them too much. So I really think the gatekeepers are actually big in complexity, who have actually entered into some of these events a lot. In fact, like Complexity, I think, made a ton of money last year entering into these kind of like tier 2 100K events over the course of the year. And Big also feel like I think they've got not an inferiority complex, but they haven't quite proven themselves to be like 100% top tier all the time. I think over the course of the last year, they're like, yes, top teams are probably very afraid of them, but they themselves can be even disappointed in some of their recent results. And I tweeted out like 2 weeks ago, like, I'm never going to sleep on Big again. Like, obviously bad timing for me. I should have just waited a couple extra weeks and then I could have been, continuing to sleep on Big and be, have a great night's sleep as well. But so who knows when they'll actually get to that level, but they will be a testing ground, I think, for a lot of these teams.
You think
I completely... Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, you first, Adam.
No, funny enough, I completely agree with putting Big in there. Complexity as well, but I do feel like the ceiling for Complexity is a little bit higher. With the Oboe thing, that kind of set them back, but I do think they could linger in the top 5 a little bit more. I would also add to that an OG or a Fun Plus Phoenix, which previously God sent. Those are like the 3 European sides that like they've got the championship pedigree probably like once or twice in their whole careers, but they kind of have to. They're the team that is going to hold you accountable if you don't come to play, but they're not likely to be contenders tournament after tournament, and I think that's why we see them that way. Funny enough, Big was the one team in 2020 for the Pinnacle Power Ranks that was in all of my. They qualified for all of my iterations of it. So what I was doing was assessing just on monthly blocks. There was no prior rank coming into it, and Big continuously was like 7th to 10th in that ranking. So I definitely think as far as gatekeepers to the tier 1 echelon, meaning just sub Na'Vi Astralis, you're looking at the big clan boys consistently.
What I was going to say was I think the 2 teams that have qualified out of so far. Sorry, Pinnacle Cup so far have been Havu and Endpoint. Put them into a match straight up, say tomorrow, against the likes of Complexity, Big, Fun Plus Phoenix. Who do you think wins? Do you think the tier 2 actually have a chance, or do you think that there's still a massive gap between tier 2 and tier 1?
I think that they would never be like I don't think they would have like terrible odds versus a lot of these teams. I think it would only be fair to still consider them underdogs because I really believe that the only difference at some point with these teams, especially since the like Endpoint or Havu are going to come in way more prepared than any team they play against when they're trying to punch upwards. I think the main difference is going to be how confident, what their ability is going to be in making a comeback happen if they need to, and also like the confidence in general of like winning the match. I mean, sometimes you go into a match that you think you're supposed to lose, you're very unlikely to win that match right away just because of that reason. So it'll take a couple of rounds of sparring before you can like actually pull out the win. So if they go into match tomorrow, I feel like Endpoint or Havu could have their streak broken by quite a few teams in the top 10. I don't think they would just be handed a win, but with their confidence, I think maybe Vitality might be weak enough right now, like in a weird spot where they could like drop some random match, but even that I think would be a kind of unlikely. I don't know where you stand, Adam.
I think Havu and Endpoint are not created the same here. So even though the 2-3-0 teams, I would not put them in the same category or pricing for an upset. Havu, I would say, like if you're facing your big clan through like Heroic, Mouse Sports Fnatic, I could see you pricing them at like a 28 to 35% here for an upset, and I would be on Havu in that case. With Endpoint, I think you're looking at sub 25. You're looking at 18-20% here for any of those same teams. So you're essentially saying like a 5-1 underdog. And I think you'll see that if Endpoint do come up against even Gambit, I think you're going to see a 4-1 type pricing. And that's because, if you look at, I don't know, Endpoint's just a tricky one. First of all, I mean, I live in England, and I know a lot of the talent, the casters, all that stuff. That there's a lot of, how about the good old days of UKCS and stuff. And so with Endpoint, there's a belief that they've just been missing like the one or they've just been missing like the one superstar that they needed. Yeah, sorry, crap. They're missing the one superstar that they maybe needed to break into like a top 10. But I've been watching them for various iterations of that roster, and I think when it was Epsilon, part of them were Epsilon before that.
Yeah.
I think Smoothie was on them for a bit, and it just seems like they've just kind of missed the stride as far as breaking into upsets and stuff like that. I don't think they've played really any top 5 teams in last year, and that's just because they don't progress far enough. There's too much talent.
Yeah, I think they've got 3 problems. So I think one is the fact that Mighty Max is not a high fragging IGL, but not Kerrigan in terms of how smart he is, right? So he pretty much, I think his stats do weigh a little bit heavier on the team than some other IGLs who play similarly to him. And then that when it comes to performing these upsets, and then the other 2 question marks for me are Crucial and Surreal, because I think that they're really good players, but they're really streaky as well. And right now, the reason they're 3-0 is because Crucial and Surreal are like doing huge work. Now I think Flames is my moonshot pick for this year in terms of how much his stock will rise, because I feel like he's got the makings of to be an actual superstar in this game.
Really?
Partly because of the consistency, partly because of he looks like a tenured player when you watch him on T side. He knows how to take map control, apply pressure, all of these things without it feels like I actually can't believe how much he knows, and I don't know who taught him. Basically, when I watch him play on T side, it reminds me of when I watched Dexter play early on as well. Just how much confidence he has, and how aware he is of the fact of these intangibles when he's all alone and has to make sure a spot is taken care of, or make sure his opponent is terrified at all times. He really understands how to do that in a way that I think would be very hard to teach somebody. So I have high hopes for Flames, but Crucial is an opper that's been around the block, and he's shown a really high level, but too streaky to be reliable. So it's hard to say if they'll keep it up, but him and Surreal are 2 players who have to show us they can be consistent before we can believe it, because we haven't seen it yet.
What do you think about them sort of consistently being that farm team that we used to see Heroic be for the Danish scene, where it just seems like they've had some real good talent come through that roster with Crucial and Surreal, right? And do you think that is going to continue? You think that have you heard with your insider connections, are these guys committed to staying the route together? Or?
I think that they're okay. I guess the best. There's the NA version of Endpoint is Triumph, probably, where you have Mighty Max, Shake Zula, and everybody he makes good at CS just ends up getting poached. And it feels like at this point the scene is too developed to be able to hold a roster together when Endpoint. I think they're very aware of their position, and it's just hard to go from org to super org at this point. So Endpoint have the problem of we have the opportunity to build up a player and then sell them for a lot of money to a top org, and I think that's what they think of when they look at Flames. And I think Mighty Max is just hoping that doesn't happen, but I think ultimately they're in some sense their fate is probably sealed in that way. I really hate that, because I wish even Triumph stayed together with. I don't like all the talent to go into one place. I think it's bad for the overall scene in Europe and NA. I'd rather have Triumph have Grim. Curry would have stayed in NA, or would have stayed in CS if Triumph had stayed together, and you would have Junior on that team as well. Then Henny maybe stays on Furia. You've got more talent across the board. And Endpoint feel they're just like the nest, and Mighty Max is the hen.
maybe they'll get a Pinnacle Cup win, and that'll give the org the
Right,
boost
yeah.
they have to give them all bonuses. And
There we go.
yeah,
They did it with Thomas, didn't they? They got Thomas, kind of brought him out, and he went to Envy, I believe.
Yeah.
And I imagine that must have been, a great
Tough.
kind of economic plus for Endpoint. But in terms of what it did to the team, it took them a while to kind of recover, didn't it?
Would you be happy to be Thomas? Okay, because you collected a big check. Okay, but you collected a big check.
You went to die though.
You went to die. That's the thing. You got paid like a lot of money for not playing a lot for like a year and a half or something. But your career just took a dump. I mean, unfortunately, someone took a dump on your career basically and put you in that spot. So would you take it? Would you take like a year of salary to basically do nothing and now have to work your way back into top level CS?
He was already on a salary. Yeah, he was already on a semi-decent salary at Endpoint. So I suspect that probably not in the sense. It's not like he's not making anything. If he was on a team without a salary, I can understand it, but he's still making stuff and he's still improving when he was on Endpoint. So I personally wouldn't. But
I don't think I would either. He was actually the real deal, wasn't he? He
was.
Yeah. I don't want to say was. Sorry, he's not dead, but he's really good. And
hopefully he's all right. Yeah.
Maybe he can fill in for Flames when someone buys Flames from Endpoint. Rips Flames from Endpoint.
Yeah. Where do you think Flames goes if he does go out of Endpoint?
So I look at Flames as like a young Stewie 2K. I think right now Stewie 2K, he's gone through a little bit too much to be the same player that he used to be. But I think Flames has that incredible confidence and like that right attitude and like the right amount of fire to fill in as a player, like a really strong entry fragger. And who knows where his career would take him. I actually didn't realize Dexter would end up opping so full time on this new lineup and is doing obviously really well. But I don't know. Sometimes when I look at players to fill in, like I'll look at like where Kenny S can go, and then I'll go through the list of like the top 20 teams, and I'm like, there's literally nowhere he can go. It's like hard to say sometimes where you can actually fit a player in. But at least as a rifler and entry fragger, there might be an opportunity. Like, let's say Big have some bad results. There's a chance that they might open up to the idea of having someone like Flames come in because they're already open to an international lineup. They might see someone as being a little bit too inconsistent. Maybe they just feel like they can't actually hang with their talent at the tier 1 consistently. And there might be a spot there for them. I think Complexity are another team. I don't think that roster change will happen because they've got a really good thing going, but that's another potential where they've got an international lineup. They have been open to roster changes in the past. They took a chance on Oboe, for example. So there's a chance that they might be open to that.
Cloud9 maybe?
Cloud9 is another one, actually. Yeah, that's a good one. They probably, unfortunately, it had to probably be someone like a Mezzi. When I look at Cloud9, I'm like, there's no one I want to cut, but but it's like something does not exactly fit.
Yeah.
Something else as well on the topic of teams that have kind of done pretty well recently. As times that have kind of faded out a little bit. We'll talk about Dignitas, who kind of came into this lineup, or came into this tournament thinking, I would have rated them on paper at least one of the better teams in the Swiss stage. And I actually cast their debut game. And we saw their Twitter an hour before the game against Havu. They bench Harry, bring in Lecro, and with an hour warning, they then go into their first match.
And Lecro I
don't know.
But then it wasn't Lecro's fault, was it? They actually didn't. He play
really well,
incredibly well across all the matches they played.
Yeah, they got 2-0'd, and he did really well on map 1. Which I think when you get a new player in, you learn one map really, really quickly. You then have that one that you can use as a basis, and then you can slowly progress through your map pool, especially when you don't have much time. I think with Lecro, they did that with Dust too. They just got him on Dust, taught him how to play, told him what he wants to do in a team. He goes on Dust, shines so brightly. He played amazingly. Then goes to Nuke, which is a bit of a harder map to learn. And of course, didn't quite have the perfection on it that Havu did, who of course were on fire at the time. And they just stagnated loads. And I just wasn't expecting Dignitas to go 1-3 in the Swiss stage.
Yeah, they also had it looks like 4 OT games, and 3 of those games were losses of the 4 series that they played. So the Havu games, both going to OT and losing. That's tough. and that can be a matter of resilience and also just awkwardness with having like a last minute roster change that can happen as well. Yeah, I mean, yeah, in that sense, that was their opportunity. They could have taken out Havu, which would have been one of the harder opponents, of course, and then they would have had a much easier time moving forward.
So for me, the whole frustration of this roster is the weakness on CT side. They have, going back to Flashpoint Season 1, this team has looked very anemic on so many maps CT side, including Nuke, for instance, Train, very typically traditional CT sides, CT leaning, I should say. And now you're bringing in Lekro, who's a proven, he's been in a number of roles, but why are you not dropping a Freiburg here was my question. And I love the legends. I'm one of the old guys, I find myself every conversation I have with CSGO bettors, I'm typically 5 to 10 years older than them. So I have respect for the legends, but in my opinion, this roster is not going anywhere when you've got two guys who are over the hill. It's one thing to have one of the legends, one of the names, one of the, if you're trying to promote the brand, it's really good to have them. But having them both, it's not an easy topic to discuss. But when you're talking about, so let me give you an example. I was on Dignitas today against Windstrike. They've won the second map pistol, the opening pistol. The CT side setup for holding long A is one guy at car with an AUG and one guy at Goose with an MP9. The guy at Goose peeks out to fight the two scouts with the MP9 before the AUG has contact as they push towards, Ninja around the L band. I don't know why. There was no flash. He wasn't Molotov out of it. And he is dry peeking the long, it made no logical sense to me. And there's flaws in their gameplay on CT side that, maybe because they now have a new player, they still have some kinks to work out. But that for me has been they went on a nice little stretch here a little bit earlier this year. But for me, the weakness on their CT sides stems from poor team play, maybe poor amount of firepower. I'm not sure what it is, but it's on a number of maps, and it looks very, very bad for the caliber that they are.
I don't think you need to sugarcoat it at all. I think your point about Freiburg is just that he's just not good enough, and he's not performing well enough. And I think the difference is that Forrest has always been a better player than Freiburg, and considerably more consistent across his career. There's never really been any question marks about him. And as you mentioned, maybe Forrest isn't going to be a top 20 player for anymore in his career, but he's still going to be super valuable and can be relevant on a top team. I could see him totally fitting in. Yes. If the right lineup came around and Swedish CS was stronger, then you might see him as if he could be as consistent as RPK, which I think he could easily pull off, then he could be on a team as good as Vitality if there was enough Swedish talent around him. Freiburg would not be able to, and is right now not performing well enough at all. So I think that makes perfect sense. I personally don't rate Dignitas at all from a team play perspective. When I don't know how good they are now, but their Flashpoint games that you're talking about, I thought they were just completely lost. In terms of game plan, I think I watched one of their demos on Vertigo, also on the CT side, where it just felt like they were just unaware of when fights would happen, and they just looked totally out of sync, and none of them could win duels.
Sorry.
And just none of them could win duels. They just didn't have enough firepower to win duels.
Yeah, it felt like I don't want to get too negative, but you did bring up Dignitas Krev. That wasn't something that I promised myself I wasn't going to rant about on this one. But they have some holes, and so I was not looking at them as a team it's not that I didn't see them progressing, but when we entered this discussion today, we're talking about how deep this group of 16 teams is. Dignitas is not one that I identified as a clear cut through to the next rounds. Yeah.
On the topic of getting a older talent and putting them amongst newer talent, and the idea being so that's sort of maybe Forest can do, where it kind of develops that newer talent around them. I think Sinners, they've done that pretty damn well. Yeah, Oscar, he's kind of stepped down from top tier CS down into Sinners, and yeah, I think they've been doing pretty damn well recently. I think they're currently still in the top 30. Ranked 26. So they've definitely had a pretty good job. I believe they're currently 2-1 right now at the Swiss stage. They're probably going to be getting through. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Oscar is making it look like he's back on Mouse Sports, and like it's consistent. He's consistently carrying in some of their big matches. Godsent and I think Extremum were two matches where he had like absolutely insane KDs. Like I think, yeah, he was the 1.45 rating across 3 maps against this Extremum, and I think we had a really insane game versus Godsent, if I'm not mistaken. Was that the team that he really? Oh yeah, it was Godsent. Yeah, the 2-0 here, where he had a 1.74 rating across 2 maps, and I think Inferno Vertigo 24-7 on Vertigo, and with a 1.92, and to follow that 22-9 on the second map. He's been insane. He's 29 years old, by the way, but he's also averaging 29 kills a match. So I can't wait to see how he continues to be consistent no matter how old he gets.
Yeah, I've been watching this team for just, I guess, I mean they're like another one of these static European teams that are consistently in the home sweet home in the 9 to 5 events, and it's just a question of when they when do they get their shot to sort of see what they can do against a higher level opponent, where maybe we see them actually even better than they're looking now. When you play so many online matches, I think there's AGO beats them one week or Flames beat them one week, then they do it to them the week after. We don't really get a sense of who amongst these teams is going to raise the bar. And so, yeah, Oscar's been great. I think being on an entirely Czech lineup is I'm very much for that as a general.
It's cool,
yeah. So I'm interested to see what comes of that roster.
Yeah. Do you rate this team though? Like they're like, I feel like when I've seen them play, they look a little bit messy to me. Like I think very top heavy, a little bit messy. I'm huge on Oscar. I think it's awesome. It's not easy to just create an environment where a player can like take that much space and also play that well. But as a team, it's not like I can't see them like winning this event, for example.
No, that's right. And like, so if you look at their composition, maybe you say, okay, they're like a Gambit in that they've got an old vet who's been there, done that, and he's more stable emotionally now, and he can share some insight. But I don't see the younger pool of talent, even like a Neofrag who's been supreme, and every time I'm posting his projections on our site, he's always like at that 40.5 projection mark. But even for him, I don't see him as being a Dexter or an Ilian who can sort of consistently put up a 0.8 KPR. So yeah, it's nice to see the little surge here and there, but I don't have them circled.
Launders, there's another team I want to talk about as well.
Okay.
Actually, 2 teams that kind of fall under the same category, and that's Brazilian teams coming to Europe to play in these. Team 1 and Godsent. Now, I know I've cast 2 of Godsent's 3 games. I think I've cast all 3 of Team 1's games, and I think the word inconsistent doesn't even come close to scraping how 50-50 watching them play is. Like, it's just, when you see the right pieces there, like you see the flair from these newer talent who just have a round where they run out and play the round like it's a point-and-click adventure game, and then you have other rounds where it's almost as if they're playing against one another, and I just don't know how to describe it. It truly is just weird to see such a team that can be so good but have so much mess at the same time.
Yeah,
it's really, really hard to describe.
Yeah, it kind of feels like MIBR for like that last year in a way where like they could play a match and call an incredibly detailed CT side that looks super tricky and hard to read, and then they'll pull it off and then look totally despondent in the second half where like seem to have run out of ideas totally. I think for a couple of reasons, probably. Number one, it's new lineups that are trying to get practice in a tough region and are also bringing a style of CS without the same level of leadership that they used to have. Like a style of CS that, like the Brazilian style of CS, without the same leadership. So they've got some of the pieces. So there's going to be personality flaws, and I don't think any of the new crop of Brazilian lineups that have come up are honestly even pound for pound as strong as that, like that brief flash in the pan MIBR lineup with KNG, Leo, TRK, who really came up huge. I don't think that these two teams are going to be able to fill in or overcome those results or even become as good as that lineup could have become. I'm not exactly sure what went wrong there, but I had a huge faith in that, and I feel like KNG especially is a big part of it. And I don't think they're going to be able to fill in that gaps. Like maybe Phelps and Taco can bring some experience, but there's too many players to develop, I think, all at the same time outside of that. And even like looking at Malbs, for example, who is one of the hopes there for Team One. He had a great year in 2020, versus the NA teams, and that's great to see. You just gotta that's his foundation. That's where he played, and in his matches he did well. But his stats have taken a hit playing in some of these recent matches, and that has to be brought up. Of course, he, as a focus of the match, he's going to be responsible for some of their big wins and losses.
For me, these two teams, they're slumping. I don't know if it's being over here for too long. I don't actually know how long they've been over here, but do you know Mohan when they came over?
Probably like a month and a half. I don't know.
Yeah. But so if we want to use the experts over at the Pinnacle on the trading side, they priced Godsent at 75-80%. Their first match this year, playing against the Lyngby Vikings, they got 2-0'd by the Lyngby Vikings. Okay, entering the Pinnacle Cup, Godsent was priced again in that 70-75% range against Team One. They got the 2-0 there, but if you look at where they are tomorrow, Godsent is an underdog against Copenhagen Flames to about 45% or 47%, somewhere in there. And so you look at falling stock on teams. This is your evidence of that. Today, I mean, right now, Team One is playing Apex, Apex is the Swedish remnants. They've got Dennis from Old Fnatic. They've got the twins, Relax and Freddy Frog. Online DGen bettors will know these guys quite well, but they've never, with Red Reserve, I think they won a DreamHack, 3 years ago. But really, these are not. Apex is not a team that should be 75% against Team One. They should maybe be 55%. So for me, Team One and Godsent have just been this whole online period in 2021 has not been good to them. If it's a motivation issue, if it's a roster issue, I'm not sure. But and I'm on Team One at the moment, watching them struggle on Dust 2. But the point is that their performance is not even making up for their very low price. Even in a buy low situation is how I see them tomorrow and today. They're still underperforming even that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see inconsistent at best. They probably will pull out a couple of wins. They're probably extremely motivated. I mean, I put it frankly, like if I was Godsent, I wouldn't have picked this lineup. I think that it was a huge risk, but they get a ton of brand power having picked up a Brazilian lineup just because huge fan base and Taco's just bringing over huge numbers. So and I think for the players, they don't want this opportunity to pass without like them having to be able to do something. But this could be one of the last teams that we see Taco or Phelps play on, right? The rest of them probably could potentially learn from this and move on, but those two really have, I think, a lot to prove. So for that reason, I think, maybe see a couple of strong upsets, but I guess without really fast development or like some kind of improvement in terms of the leadership, I don't know if the consistency will be there. The talent is just not that sick. And I know there's a lot of, like outside of the CIS, the Brazilian region is probably as strong or maybe even stronger for all we know. Like we don't know how many players are going to come out of there, but like how long before we see who is the next Fallen, and like who's the next Fallen, who's the next whole SK, right? Who's the next FNX? Who is the next who is the next Fur? I mean, these are important questions because you can have a huge reason, but you've got to have at least one super strong lineup at this point coming out to be able to keep up with those individual levels. I don't see anything like that right now.
Assuming Team One departs shortly here, their next two matches for ESL Pro League are Furia and MIBR next week. So
Nice.
yeah,
probably both the upsets. They'll probably split you.
Exactly after everything we just talked
choice.
about. Yeah, they're saving their strats for that. Just to give you guys that the look ahead.
We've looked at a fair few teams, but tell you what, while we are waiting for this Team 1 Apex game to kind of progress, it looks like it is looking fairly Apex oriented. But let's hit your guys' predictions. Yeah, we've got two teams that have progressed out to the stage. There's 6 more left to do so. Who do you think it's going to be? Yeah. At the moment, we've got the likes of Namiga, there's a Krakow, Copenhagen Flames, there's Saw, Extreme, and Windstrike, and of course, teams playing at the moment. It's a fairly diverse range, but which 6 do you think are going through? Probably answer when you're ready, because you have to take a moment to think about this.
Okay. I'm sure you probably have some kind of answer already. I don't know if I could.
Sure, I can go ahead. So Windstrike, I think, is going to get that 3-2. I also think Copenhagen Flames, they have moments where their T side goes a little bit missing, or they kind of throw away a large lead. We've seen that a little bit recently, but I do think they have the balance and the map pull to still get through. Wisla Krakow, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. I've never actually.
I think so. Yeah.
Saying that name of that.
Wisla, okay.
Wisla, okay. Polish team, that, in my opinion, they will get it done. I've been very pleasantly surprised by Hades through the event, through watching him for a little. I think he's a diamond in the rough potentially. I don't know if I would hate to see the Polish region get divided and further moved around. There's been a lot of shuffling, but I do think there's quite a few players in the making for a super Polish team once more, and Hades would be on my personal choice for that team. So I do think they'll get through, and Namiga, I think those 4 I really like to go through, but we'll see.
Outside of that, yeah, I think Namiga does. I mean, Namiga have not an easy match, but maybe one of the easier for this this next game. So I think maybe slightly unlikely, but I think I would take Namiga, Copenhagen Flames, Godsend. I guess they've got 2 chances to play, which just makes this a little bit more difficult to say that they won't be able to get out. But Extremum already a match ahead. I think Windstrike for sure. I just think Windstrike are a great team. I don't know. I think it's just hard. Some of their games are going to be hard, but I think they're just, in my opinion, like they're my next favorite team outside of Endpoint and Havu and Copenhagen Flames, I guess, in this whole thing. Like I think they're actually a really strong team. I watched their game versus Cloud9, and I was like, they just look like a better team than Cloud9, which is hard to admit, but they actually look very good, I thought.
It was funny. They lost that opening match. They had a morning match in the Pinnacle. Sorry. Yeah, they had a morning match in the Pinnacle Cup, I believe, against who was it? They lost it. They got 0-2'd against Namiga. Yeah, it was Namiga, I believe. Namiga. And then, that afternoon they were playing Cloud9, and I saw the odds move heavily towards Cloud9's side after that, which is so common. And then, of course, that's the one they come out and I think it moved to a pick'em, so like a 50-50. I think prior to that, that loss in the morning, they were actually favored against Cloud9 slightly. But we saw, people being like, well, maybe C9's going to get, and then no, Windstrike, you're absolutely right. They were the better team, resoundingly.
It's interesting. Yeah, personally, pretty much inclined to agree with you there. I think Saw are going to do quite well, which is this kind of Portuguese team that have come out of the woodwork recently. And I think that there hasn't really been much opportunity for kind of that Liberia region, sort of domestic region. And that's the first ever time I've seen a Liberia region have its own qualifier. First ever time I've seen that. And so I think that they've actually had a pretty good chance to come ahead. And now that they've been given that kind of injection of practice and play at a high level, They're actually looking really damn strong. Really damn strong. And of course, they're playing with a six-man lineup as well. And they've been using it fairly well for the most part. They have been bringing in Salsworth, I think that's how you say it, for a lot of these maps. And while he hasn't played as much as his teammates, he's definitely put up the numbers. And I'm pretty impressed with them at the moment. So I think they're going to go through. That's the only one I would add to the ones you've already said. But yeah.
It's good to be a Saw fan. They've got a strong fan base as well. I'll be very happy to hear you say that.
Yeah, we saw the one that got the bus from Portugal to Blast. Was that the? Yeah. That was a cool event. Cool.
So that I think that was. Event. Was that? I think it was. So it was Giants that brought the.
Oh, that's right.
Saw were also there. Saw were also
that's
there.
Right.
But what happened was they were over in Portugal, and then we were at Blast.
Madrid.
Yeah, Madrid. Yeah, this wasn't Lisbon. Yeah, we're in Blast Madrid, and then they had it was like Fox and like all of Fox's fans basically. They put them all on a bus and drove them like 14 hours across from Portugal over to Spain. It was like nuts, and they were they definitely. Yeah, I mean, they were screaming like they had been on a bus for 14 hours. Like it was really they're making noise.
And they had at that event I think they still finished last, but I can't remember.
They got like one upset win or something.
Yeah, they got one upset win and then like a few really close ones against Nip and C9, or it was cool. We need like we were referencing earlier. We need more teams that because the talent pool is so broad. We need more teams to have a spotlight. And I think that's just again going back to what the Pinnacle Cup is trying to provide. We know the FaZe, the Navis, Astralis. We know that they're going to get their day in the sun and get lots of glory. But giving opportunities and legitimate prize money for these teams is so good. And in lulls in the calendar too, when there isn't a major $1 million event going on. So yeah.
Because I think that's kind of approaching a wrap. Of course, everybody, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back in a short while to bring you the next installment of Chance to be a Champion, a Pinnacle Cup podcast. For now, though, if you have any questions for me or any of my co-hosts, you can head over to our Twitter at Pinnacle Esports and drop us a message, or we'll make sure that we can answer as many as possible for the next podcast. Of course, once again, thank you so much for watching. I've been Kremer32. I've been joined by Adam and Launders, both of which have been absolutely amazing. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.
Very nice.